Okay, this is EDFD653 and this is assignment 1A. The first topic I'm going to look at is social class and inequality. So this is my mind map, and if we take a closer look at some key terms, we have social stratification, which means basically the stratifying of different classes within a society. So when we talk about upper class, lower class, middle class, working class, or professional class, this is all referring to social stratification. Then the other key term is social mobility, which means basically moving within those classes or between those classes. So you can have upward mobility, downward mobility, intragenerational, intergenerational mobility, and two other key types of mobility are structural mobility and exchange mobility. So exchange mobility refers to swapping classes, basically. So going from the lower class to the upper class or vice versa. And structural mobility refers to also moving up, but not necessarily swapping relative to other people within your society. So an example is China or India, where people are getting richer overall. So people have been lifted out of poverty, but it's not necessarily the case that they have opportunity to move up into the upper class still. The next slide summarizes some of the theories of class inequality. A lot of the more recent theories focus on economic factors, but the more recent ones also focus on things like cultural factors and social factors, which include cultural factors include ways of acting, ways of talking, even music taste or sport taste, reading practices, that sort of thing. And social factors include having good networks, so having networks with other upper class people who can refer you to good jobs and help maintain your position in the upper class. The next slide looks at economic factors. So in Australia specifically, the graph on the left shows that inequality is rising in Australia. Over the past 30 years, it's been rising. And the image on the left shows that breaks down this inequality across states and also shows the difference between income and wealth inequality. So Australia is fairly equal in terms of income inequality. The top 20% earn 5 times the bottom 20%. But then if you look at wealth inequality, the top 20% of households earn 70 times the bottom 20%. So that's much higher. This slide looks at the social effects of inequality. So the graph on the left shows that the more unequal a society is, the less intergenerational exchange mobility they have. So countries like Peru, Brazil, Chile, Argentina are very unequal in terms of wealth equality, and they're also very it's also very unlikely that if you're born into a poor family, you're going to end up in an upper class, or vice versa. If you're born into a rich family, it's very unlikely you're going to end up in a lower class. But the same isn't true for countries down the bottom, like the Scandinavian countries. The graph on the right shows the role that education perhaps can play in in inequality. So education is often seen as a strong driver of social mobility. Social mobility may be reduced in more unequal countries because educational scores are on average lower in less equal countries, and education also improves more for those at the bottom of the income spectrum than those further up. So there's a lot of personal, professional relevance with this. So a lot of the relevance comes from acknowledging and being aware of the factors that can influence um, mobility and social um, stratification. So being aware of meritocratic ideals and challenging them is an example. Being aware of educational codes is another one, even though they may be implicit and unconscious. Uh, and also ensuring the cultures of the disadvantaged are not silenced.